Y'all ready? All right, sorry for the delay. That pesky Constitution just gets in the way, you know, we got to go vote. Thank y'all. You good? All right.
You're ready, sir.
All right, good afternoon. To defend our nation, our military needs state-of-the-art weaponry. That means planes, ships, missiles, drones, and other hardware and software that our warfighters can deploy in pursuit of mission objectives. But our track record at buying weapons, in my opinion, is frankly lousy. The military hardly ever acquires major weapon systems on time or within budget. It's not from lack of funding. Americans have long paid through the nose to ensure our military is well armed. For the current fiscal year alone, Congress provided the Department of War roughly $1 trillion. The agency will spend about half the sum on contracts of some sort, and including $170 billion or more on weapons systems. And that's just 1 year's spending. Our guests today from the Government Accountability Office estimate that the entire portfolio of military weapons systems now under construction will ultimately cost more than $2.4 trillion to develop and acquire. That cost estimate keeps going up, in part because the time to complete these projects keeps getting extended. GAO projects, the development of each of these weapon systems take an average of 12 years. That's twice as long as it took to fight the Second World War. It means by the time these weapons are in the hands of our warfighters, many will be at least partially obsolete. Most will cost much more than planned and deliver less warfighting capabilities than anticipated. We have got to do better, folks. This administration is at least embracing the challenge. First, it's simplifying the more than 2,000-page regulation that governs federal contracting rules and procedures and doing away with unnecessary red tape. Second, it's calling out major defense acquisition programs that are either 15% behind schedule or 15% above cost. The White House budget will consider such programs for potential termination. Third, it's taking on the big defense contractors who underpin the entire system. The President issued an executive order in January entitled Prioritizing the Warfighter and Defense Contracting. It states in part, after years of misplaced priorities, traditional defense contractors have been incentivized to prioritize investor returns over the nation's warfighters. Many large contractors, while underperforming on existing contracts, pursue newer, more lucrative contracts, stock buybacks, and excessive dividends to shareholders at the cost of production capacity, innovation, and online delivery. Effective immediately, they are not permitted in any way, shape, form, or fashion to pay dividends or buy back stock until such time as they are able to produce superior product on time and on budget. In other words, no more business as usual, no more gravy train, but Congress must also do its part. For too long, we have allowed the status quo to go on. That is why after this roundtable, I will be introducing legislation to give the Secretary of War the ability to limit stock buyback executive compensation for publicly traded companies contracting with the Pentagon. Additionally, last December, I tweeted about a ridiculous provision recently enacted as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, or commonly called the NDAA, that authorizes the Secretary of War to pay the interest on defense contractors' loans. If Congress is going to be part of the solution here, the least we can do is not make taxpayers foot the bill for debt payments that underperforming contractors owe to big banks. Hope we can all agree on that. With that, I wanted to yield to Ranking Member Stansberry, but I think what we'll do is when she comes in, I'll just let her talk, if that's all right with my friends across the aisle. And why don't we just start with you all, if that's okay. And I'd like to welcome our attendees. First, we have Shelby S. Oakley. Ms. Oakley is the Director of Contracting and National Security Acquisition at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Next, we have Carmen Malone. Ms. Malone is the Assistant Inspector General for Audit at the U.S. Department of War, Office of Inspector General. Next, we have Sean Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy is the Director of Policy and Research at Citizens Against Government Waste. And lastly, we have Julia Gledhill. Did I get that right, Ms. Gledhill? All right, great. My name's Burchett. Nobody gets it right, so don't feel bad. Ms. Gledhill is a research analyst for the National Security Reform Program at the Stimson Center. And I want to thank y'all for joining. I look forward to sharing your expertise. So at that point, we will recognize them to speak. We can do that. All right. Ms. Oakley, you're recognized for 5 minutes, but don't feel like you got to take all that.
Okay. I have a lot to say.
I know. You go right ahead.
Chairman Burchett, Mr. Burleson, thank you for the opportunity to talk about waste and Department of Defense weapon systems acquisitions. When most people hear the word waste, they think about a $10,000 toilet seat or an overpriced spare part. Those examples matter, but the waste we see in our work at DoD is more significant than that. The biggest waste is time. It's the opportunity cost of spending billions of dollars in more than a decade developing systems that arrive late with less capability than planned or not at all. Every year lost in development is a year that service members rely on older, less capable equipment while adversaries continue to modernize. Today, DoD plans to invest more than $2.4 trillion in its costliest weapons programs. Yet the average major defense acquisition program now takes more than 12 years to deliver capability to the warfighter. In the commercial world, a 12-year product cycle would be catastrophic. Think about where consumer technology was 12 years ago. Many of us were buying our first smartphone. A company that spent a decade designing a smartphone without regularly testing it with users, adapting to changing technology, or delivering iterative capability to customers would not survive. By the time the product finally reached the market, it would already be obsolete. But that is effectively what DoD continues to do in many weapons programs. Too often, programs begin with overly optimistic assumptions about technology, cost, and schedule. Programs are pushed forward and funded before technologies and designs are mature. Large contracts are awarded quickly, and success is often measured by how fast money is obligated on contracts rather than how fast useful capability is provided to the warfighter. Then the predictable happens. Schedules slip, costs grow, requirements get scaled back, quantities are reduced, and taxpayers ultimately pay more to get less and years later than promised. We have seen this pattern repeatedly across the department. Since 1990, GAO has highlighted DoD weapon system acquisition on its high-risk list. The examples of waste over those 35-plus years are staggering. Here are just two recent examples. The Army spent 8 years and billions of dollars attempting to field augmented reality goggles for soldiers through its IVAS program. Nearly 10,000 units were produced, but they didn't adequately meet the soldiers' needs and are now expected to go into storage or to be used for testing rather than into the field. Now it has initiated yet a new program to continue to try and meet user needs. The Space Force's OCX program, the planned upgrade for the GPS satellite ground system, is another stark example. After more than 13 years in development and $7 billion invested, the program was terminated this year because of low confidence it could deliver needed capability in time. Meanwhile, GPS satellites already in orbit cannot fully use some of their most advanced capabilities because OCX never materialized. Now the Space Force plans to just upgrade the existing ground system to provide those capabilities. When systems like these arrive late, DoD must spend billions more extending the lives of aging aircraft, ships, and other legacy systems that were supposed to be replaced years ago. For instance, the Air Force's new KC-46 tankers are late. As a result, it must spend money to maintain and fly the KC-135 tankers that are older than most of the pilots that fly them. The core problem is that DoD often accepts what we describe as a fail slow acquisition culture. Programs continue consuming time and money long after warning signs are visible. Instead of making smaller bets, testing early and often, delivering iteratively, and pivoting quickly when something is not working, DoD tends to double down and continue funding programs in the hope that they will eventually be solved. Our work shows there's a better way. Successful commercial companies, the ones delivering cutting-edge products, don't spend a decade locked into a plan they made before they knew the product could work. They iterate, they test constantly, they build minimum viable products. They put things in users' hands early and often. The knowledge they gain from this approach allows them to stop failing efforts before billions are sunk. In other words, they fail fast, not slow. They invest dollars as they gain knowledge, not before. In our view, improving outcomes requires several key shifts in line with these practices, and we have made numerous recommendations to DoD over the years to do so. DoD has taken some steps and has begun discussing these kinds of changes, and recent policy direction is encouraging. But policy alone is not enough. The department must fundamentally change the incentives and the culture that govern acquisition decisions. And finally, success should be measured by how quickly DoD delivers relevant, useful capability to the warfighter, not by how quickly contracts are awarded or budgets are spent. At the end of the day, waste in defense acquisition is not just a dollars and cents issue. It's a readiness issue, it's a security issue, and it's an opportunity cost issue. Every dollar and every year tied up in underperforming programs is a dollar and a year unavailable for capabilities that our service members need now. Chairman Burchett, this concludes my statement. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Malone?
Chairman Burchett, Ranking Member Stansberry, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Carmen Malone, and I'm the Assistant Inspector General for Audit for Acquisition, Contracting, and Sustainment. It is an honor to represent the Department of War Office of the Inspector General and to discuss the persistent challenges affecting cost, schedule, and performance across the department's most critical programs. Our body of oversight work, including audits, evaluations, and investigations, makes one message unmistakably clear. Effective monitoring of acquisition programs by the department is not optional. It's essential to fielding capable and affordable systems for the warfighter. When monitoring is neglected, fails, or is inconsistently applied, the result is predictable: cost growth, schedule delays, performance shortfalls, and avoidable strain on the Department of War and the defense industrial base. Across our reviews, we consistently find that program requirements are not well-defined, traceable, or kept current with validated capability needs. The Army's rapidly evolving requirements in the Integrated Visual Augmentation System drove the program towards immature technologies, resulting in redesigns, delays, and higher cost. When requirements are unstable or overly ambitious, programs pursue systems they are not ready to build. We also see that programs often prioritize schedule over cost or performance, proceeding into production with known deficiencies. In the MQ-4C Triton program, the Navy moved to initial operational capability despite unresolved developmental and operational test issues, leading to costly retrofits and a potential intelligence collection gap. The Navy spent $83.1 million to retrofit 2 MQ-4C Triton aircraft to the latest version and will need to spend additional funds to correct remaining deficiencies. When production begins before problems are understood and mitigated, the result is predictable: redesigns, delays, and inefficiencies. Fragile supply chains remain one of the most significant drivers of cost increases and schedule overruns. In the B-52 program, diminishing manufacturing sources and spare part shortages reduced aircraft availability and forced cannibalization. When suppliers disappear or materials become unavailable, programs must redesign components and requalify vendors, delaying testing, fielding, and sustainment. It is also important to note that the department officials are responsible for holding contractors accountable. In the F-35 Air Vehicle Sustainment Contract, the department paid the contractor $1.7 billion for sustainment efforts that did not meet the military services aircraft readiness requirements. For example, the average air vehicle availability for all military service F-35 aircraft was only 50% in fiscal year 2024. This is 17% lower than the average minimum requirement. Clear requirements, documented surveillance, and consistent enforcement are essential to holding contractors responsible for performance. Finally, unstable or unpredictable funding continues to harm acquisition programs and the defense industrial base. A recent Office of Inspector General audit showed that funding uncertainty delayed efforts to expand production capacity and most heavily affected small businesses, which are the department's next generation of suppliers. In the Space Force GPS 3F program, the continuing resolution limited the procurement to 1 satellite instead of 2, increasing unit costs by $10.4 million and disrupting production planning. Across these areas, the Office of Inspector General provides actionable recommendations that, if implemented, strengthen acquisition governance and improve accountability. The department's current acquisition transformation efforts, reinforcing requirements, embedding clear metrics, improving oversight tools, and building supply chain resilience address many of the root causes the OIG has found. These reforms aim to reduce redesign, improve contractor performance, and deliver capability to the warfighter more efficiently. As the department moves forward, we remain committed to providing independent oversight that supports effective, affordable, and timely capabilities for the men and women who defend our nation. I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is Sean Kennedy, and I am the Director of Policy and Research for Citizens Against Government Waste, a nonpartisan organization founded in 1984 to build support for implementation of President Reagan's private sector survey on cost control, also known as the Grace Commission. By highlighting wasteful Pentagon expenditures such as the $436 hammer, the Grace Commission inspired members of Congress to establish the bipartisan and bicameral Grace Caucus, which was built up to 199 members in 1994. The Department of Defense accounts for approximately 1/6 of federal spending, and procurement makes up around 17% of its budget. Generally, the Pentagon has demonstrated a preference for big-ticket weapon systems with lengthy development periods. However, despite significant costs, results have not always been up to par. We've heard about the $2.4 trillion that the DoD will spend and the 12 years it will take to provide even initial capability on weapon systems. This is a lumbering pace and is well behind the speed of technological advancements in modern conflict. The weapon system most emblematic of this slow, costly approach to procurement is the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which provides unmatched capability but has been fraught with delays and significant expenses. Total acquisition costs exceed $442 billion, which is 90% greater than the initial estimate, and total lifetime costs will exceed $2 trillion. The JSF has been plagued by a staggering array of persistent issues, leading to not only cost overruns, but also a lackluster readiness rate and a readiness gap where older aircraft meant to be replaced are aging. The JSF's poor return has two main drivers. First, development and acquisition on the program occurred simultaneously. When problems were identified or upgrades developed, contractors needed to make changes to aircraft that were already assembled, which inflated costs and caused further delays. Second, the nature of the contract the DoD reached for the JSF undercut the result. Under the deal, the contractor was solely responsible for the development and maintenance of many of the aircraft's subsystems and retained control over technical data and intellectual property. A September 21, 2023 GAO report determined that the DoD's failure to negotiate access to data severely hamstrung efforts to maintain aircraft, adding to costs, delaying fixes, and contributing to woeful readiness rates. Support equipment for the JSF is used to make repairs at depots frequently breaks, but because it is proprietary, the DoD must rely on contractors for fixes, which can take months. What's worse, underperforming JSF subsystems could not be replaced with existing alternatives. This created what former Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall called a perpetual monopoly. The department initiates substantial investment in the next generation of aircraft, it is vital to correct these mistakes. Thankfully, a different and promising approach is being pursued for the F-47. By using a modular open framework, the government selects a prime contractor and can choose from subsystems from other sources, allowing the replacement of underachieving aspects of the new weapon system. The DoD must apply the lessons of modern conflict to expedite its procurement process. The rapid pace of drone advancements in the Ukraine war, with iteration occurring within weeks, renders the typically prolonged DoD development path unworkable. Moreover, the U.S. military currently defends itself against incoming drone attacks in an unsustainable way, demonstrating the shortcomings of the Pentagon's preference for expensive equipment and slow timelines. In the conflict with Iran, the U.S. commonly used a PAC-3, Patriot Advanced Capability Missile, costing more than $3 million to shoot down a Shahed drone costing approximately $35,000. To defend itself against similar drones, Ukraine has employed interceptor drones that cost around $4,000. The DoD must adopt a much faster timescale and drive down costs. The process would be expedited by seeking commercial solutions as a first option. The Trump administration has stressed this point through several executive orders and policy memos, but institutional inertia has stymied similar efforts in the past. In conclusion, the DoD's propensity for lengthy and expensive procurement timelines have resulted in often highly capable but typically costly weapon systems and is not sustainable. By agreeing to more favorable contracts, learning the lessons of today's conflicts, and empowering the private sector, the Pentagon can set itself on a more efficient and effective procurement pathway. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gledhill?
Chairman Burchett, Ranking Member Stansbury, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Julia Gledhill, and I'm a researcher in the National Security Reform Program at the Stimson Center. Our program works to advance rational, evidence-based national security policies that meet today's challenges while ensuring that defense resources are used effectively, transparently, and in the best interests of the American taxpayer. My testimony today focuses on 3 points. First, unrealistic acquisition plans are a major driver of Pentagon waste. Second, rapid acquisition pathways increase the government's vulnerability to contractor price gouging. Finally, the purpose of acquisition regulations is to empower the government to act in the best interests of taxpayers, not to burden the private sector. First, overly ambitious acquisition plans set both the military and the arms industry up for failure. The military services develop acquisition plans with little regard for fiscal, industrial, and workforce limitations. Military contractors then receive awards for programs they cannot deliver within budget or on schedule, in some cases for decades. The result is not only wasted taxpayer dollars, but declining military readiness. Unnecessary acquisition programs divert resources from maintaining and sustaining mature and proven systems on which military service members rely. With that said, the question of what weapons to acquire is different from the question of how best to acquire them. Congress and the Pentagon's laser focus on speeding up the acquisition process has led to an explosion in the use of rapid acquisition tools like the Other Transaction Authority, or OTA. The argument for these tools is that they enable the military to develop and field emerging technologies faster than through traditional acquisition processes. Today, however, acquisition tools like the OTA are becoming the rule rather than the exception to the traditional acquisition process. For example, obligations for prototyping and production OTAs increased tenfold from 2016 to 2024, reaching $18 billion just 2 years ago. In the past year alone, Space Systems Command awarded 20 OTAs valued at a combined total of up to $3.2 billion for companies to develop space-based interceptors. These are a key component of the Pentagon's Missile Defense Shield, dubbed Golden Dome for America, for which the Pentagon has yet to produce an objective architecture detailing what systems will be deployed and in what quantities. The risk of over-reliance on rapid acquisition is more Pentagon waste. OTAs are not subject to certain competition and cost transparency standards embedded in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR. Critically, they are exempt from the Competition and Contracting Act and the Truthful Cost and Pricing Data Act, colloquially known as TINA, statutes designed to protect the taxpayer from overcharging by private contractors. Finally, we often hear that the acquisition process is slow because it is overregulated. But in conducting the acquisition process, the government is not a third-party regulator, as is the case with the Environmental Protection Agency or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, for example. Rather, acquisition regulations serve as purchasing policies for the government in its business arrangements with contractors, a completely separate paradigm than when the government is regulating an industry in its sovereign capacity. The FAR exists to ensure that the government maintains leverage in negotiations with private contractors. One of its most important tools is certified cost and pricing information, which contractors must validate as accurate, complete, and current. These data give the Pentagon insight into contractors' cost and profit margins, strengthening the department's ability to identify fair and reasonable pricing, especially in sole source environments. Yet contractors are rarely required to provide certified cost and pricing information. Since 1993, Congress has raised the mandatory disclosure threshold from $100,000 to $10 million, far outpacing inflation. Meanwhile, lawmakers have dramatically expanded what contractors are considered commercial products and services, even in sole source situations, which further reduces the number of contracts subject to cost transparency requirements. In theory, the Pentagon doesn't need certified cost and pricing data for commercial products and services because they are already subject to price competition in the public marketplace. The problem is that the Pentagon classifies military products, such as the C-130J military transport aircraft, specialized aircraft spare parts, and many other items as commercial, even though they are not sold in substantial quantities in the public marketplace or even sold commercially at all. Ultimately, the best way to save taxpayers' money on military contracts is to make strategic trade-offs about what capabilities the military needs and why. But regardless of what the Pentagon buys, it should leverage every tool available to negotiate the best possible contract prices on behalf of taxpayers. Thank you again for convening this important roundtable, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll recognize Ms. Stansberry for her opening statement. Chair Lady.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for this roundtable. I think it is fair to say that there is always bipartisan agreement that the government spends way too much money with way too little accountability, and that is certainly the case when it comes to Department of Defense. And so I'm glad that we're here today to talk about how to fix this problem, which is such a behemoth, especially in the federal government. And I appreciate the chairman's continued bipartisan efforts to actually work on real issues that are affecting our government and our ability to serve the people of this great nation. In New Mexico, we have a long and proud history of military service, and in my district, we have not only Kirtland Air Force Base, but portions of the National Labs, Air Force Research Laboratories, and others. And I'm proud of the bipartisan efforts of this committee to improve how DoD invests our taxpayer dollars and delivers critical capabilities to protect our warfighters. DoD weapons system acquisition and contract management have been on the GAO's high-risk list since the early 1990s, but I think it's fair to say that the U.S. has had this problem since its founding. In fact, when you look back at the history of weapons acquisition going back into the 1800s, there was all kinds of contracting issues going back over many generations. Over the last 30 years, though, Congress and DoD have pursued a number of reforms aimed at improving costs, schedules, and acquisition outcomes. While collaborative efforts between the Pentagon and Capitol Hill have yielded some improvements and best practices, DoD remains alarmingly slow when it comes to delivering innovation to our men and women in uniform. And as our nation faces mounting competition on a global stage, the expected time frame for delivering new major capabilities is longer than 10 years. And as any of you know who are here to talk about these issues today, that time frame is simply incompatible with not only the evolving threats, but also the rate of technological change we see every single day, even in our own personal technologies that we use. Even before this current administration asked for a staggering $1.5 trillion, which represents a 44% increase in defense spending this year for systems we're not even clear what they're trying to build. DoD was already spending trillions on major defense acquisition projects, many of which are behind schedule, over budget, or already antiquated or obsolete systems before they've even hit the field. The American people deserve to know that DoD is being diligent, that they are being a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars, and translating investments into systems that support our men and women in uniform. Yet year after year, case after case, we see emerging, staggering, expensive consequences of insufficient planning, weak oversight, and, truth be told, questionable program execution. And this includes overspending on major weapons systems, military contract overruns, audit issues, procurement issues, and the purchase of weapons systems that are obsolete by the time they hit the field. When it comes to acquisition reform, we ignore the lessons learned from the failures of our past at our own peril. Over the last administration, DoD made some significant progress in implementing some of the more promising elements of the adaptive acquisition framework and pursued key capabilities like a replicator drone program that started to address new paradigms in defense. But unfortunately, what we've seen over the last year and a half under the current administration is the dismantling of many of the guardrails that were put in place to address acquisition issues. And I would be remiss if I did not note that over the course of DOJ's tenure at the beginning of this administration, they fired many of our most distinguished acquisitions agents at the Department of Defense, whose job was to be the watchdog to make sure we weren't doing wasteful spending. Irony, hashtag irony. I fear that these efforts have proven a fool's errand, much like many of the other high-profile defense projects that we've seen. And so it's very important that we actually dig deep and look at real issues that GAO and others have been identifying for decades in the process. So I'm grateful. I share a lot of agreement with my colleague across the aisle here. I think there is a ample amount of bipartisan work that can be done to make sure that taxpayers and warfighters are able to pursue reforms that are rooted in evidence and good practices. And I think that there is good bipartisan legislation that we can move forward on. So I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today and to working with the chairman on these issues.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I'll go into my questions, if that's okay with y'all. The Romans built the Colosseums in 8 years, the Colosseum in 8 years. The Manhattan Project took only 3 years to produce the first atomic bomb. Now it takes us 4 times that long to roll out a new military plane or ship. I want to know what's going on. Have we gone backwards? Technology, I know, changes so quickly. How cutting edge will these weapon systems be by the time we're able to deploy them? And is that part of the plan? Ms. Oakley, a year ago, why don't we go with that? Why don't all y'all try to answer that? Start with Ms. Oakley.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, those were special circumstances in terms of the Manhattan Project, for sure, and the level of resources that were devoted to accomplishing that. But I think it is safe to say that we have gone backward. The timeframes for how long it takes to develop a major weapons acquisition program have increased. And it would be easy to blame that on one thing or another. There's various different reasons why that's the case, but our work has really keyed in on whether these programs were actually achievable from the very beginning. Were they based on a sound foundation, a solid business case to be able to say, we can indeed achieve this with the technologies that are available, with the industrial base that exists now, and with the workforce that we have at the Department of Defense. And so, it's hard to say that we've gone back because our technologies and our weapons are incredibly advanced now and the most advanced in the world still, thankfully. But it does take much, much longer than expected. And until we begin to structure acquisitions to be able to be iterated upon and to deliver capability more quickly, we're going to continue to be behind the 8 ball, delivering programs that are obsolete and need to be modernized from the minute they're fielded.
Ms. Blum?
It's a great question and really important because schedule overruns have really hurt the department overall. We kind of focus in on that requirements development early on and then also going into production too early. And what I mean by too early is knowing that we have deficiencies in going into production. That requires us to retrofit everything or find even more deficiencies along the way. So the department does have some acquisition transformation strategies that they're working on, but it is going to require consistent leadership, cultural foundation, and fundamental changes in how we do business with our.
What do you mean by cultural foundation?
So right now, we as the department, I should say, the department is very set in how it does business with the contractors, and if the department is going to move into a new direction of how it does acquisition, even if it's removing some of the acquisition rules that have been developed maybe as guardrails along the way, and we want to get rid of those because they're not statutorily required. You have a lot of training to do of the staff to get them to understand that certain rules no longer exist, or that there is a new way of contracting through OTAs or other rapid acquisition ways of doing things. So it does require a lot of new training and for everyone in the acquisition environment to understand what is available to them and what no longer needs to occur.
Mr. Kennedy.
Excuse me. I would point to something that former Air Force Secretary, in 2015, Deborah Lee James said, the number one lesson of the F-35 is, quote, never again should we be flying an aircraft while we're building it. And just to echo some of what we've heard so far, you know, any fixes or updates that were developed over that time frame need to then be applied to every single purchased F-35, which really delayed this program. And you know, that quote comes from 2015. So 11 years later, this hasn't changed. Like, this problem is still occurring. In terms of how to move faster, I would say the number one possibility is to lean in more to the existing private sector technology. Just because one contractor is the best in the world at building an airframe doesn't mean that contractor should also be developing the software that the aircraft runs upon. Often there may be something that exists in the private sector that maybe exists in 70 or 80% of the capability that the department wants to use. And so why not work with that existing product and build it up to 100%? And this can be used to expedite really any sort of program, which is looking first to the private sector.
Thank you, Mr. Burchett. I would say that we have gone backwards because we've become too ambitious in the scope of our programs as well as the scale of technological integration in our weapon programs, including major aircraft and shipbuilding programs. Technology is always going to outpace law and regulation, so the challenge is not integrating every new technology, but betting on the right capabilities. The best way to pick reliable, cost-effective systems that fill capability gaps and mission requirements is to prioritize simplicity and to avoid concurrent development, which my colleagues have referenced. The simultaneous development and production of a program creates a lot of design flaws that really drive sustainment costs later on. And you know, the GAO has said that sustainment accounts for about 70% of a life cycle cost for a weapon program. Only the poorly conceived, badly designed weapons get held up by realistic, thorough, and tough operational tests. And the last point I'll make is that you know, during the Second World War, when we were pumping out aircraft at unprecedented rates that we can't replicate today, we actually had a war production board that conducted feasibility studies based on not only our financial resources, but also our industrial capacity. And in some ways, you might say that today we are pursuing acquisition programs with less restraint than we were doing during the largest conflict in human history.
Thank you all. We're going to go back and forth between me and Ms. Stansberry. I'll yield to her.
All right, thank you so much. You know, one of the things I think is really helpful about these roundtables is they're also an opportunity to help share with the public how things work inside the government. And so I wonder, Inspector General Malone, it's really hard to understand how DOD does its planning and budgeting. And then, of course, there's multiple bills through which defense spending happens here on the Hill. And so I wonder if you could just take a minute or two as best you can to kind of help us understand and wrap our arms around it between defense appropriations, the NDAA, special appropriations, and whatever internal planning that DOD does. How does it work? 1 minute or less, no. As briefly
I think
as
you just
can.
asked me to explain for like an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of the point, right? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so planning begins, I mean, honestly, at this rate, decades before we ever start production. And that is part of the problem. And so right now it is that the department has they start planning about 5 years in advance of like, this is what we plan to do for the next 5 years. And they're constantly bringing that budget forward and trying to understand that. Through that, it fits into the budget process, which comes to Congress. You all have your say. But even through acquisition, like anytime that we have a delay in funding, a continuing resolution, that changes how their entire planning process. So they may have been planning to go into a contract in, say, October, but because it's a new start, they can't do that. And so that then further delays that until we have an appropriation set up, and it may be 3 months, 6 months into a new fiscal year, and all of a sudden they're just getting started on a program that they thought they were going to have an entire year to do. So our recent report that discussed this actually talked about the planning the department needs to do, because continuing resolutions are not new, they're not going away, and so the department needs to learn how to plan for that. And so that is one thing that I think the department can do a little bit better, and we made some suggestions for that in our report. But that's my 1-minute answer.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really helpful, and I think it's helpful also for folks to understand that, like, even with the best planning that happens, say 5 to 10 years out for weapon system, for technology development, and for infrastructure, because it takes a whole heck of a lot of infrastructure to build and maintain all of these systems and do the research for it. Even if you've done the most careful planning in the world, then they send it over to these bozos, and I'm not meaning you, I mean all of us here in Congress, where it goes through the political sausage making and it goes through multiple bills. You've got the Milcon construction bill, which is part of the appropriations process. It goes through appropriations. You have NDAA. You want to say something about that?
I was just going to say, Bozo just texted me and said he did not appreciate the
Oh, I'm
insult.
sorry. I'm sorry. And then, like I said, we have these sort of special appropriations or supplemental appropriations that we get either because it's a time of war and there's a need to replenish weapon systems, or we have like the big ugly bill last year, or one big beautiful bill, where we made this massive investment in building weapon systems, some of which we're not ever going to use. So it's a really, I think, unruly political process, and figuring out how to navigate it to address waste is a really big challenge. And so I wonder, Ms. Oakley, we really appreciate the work that GAO does. I believe this is exactly why GAO exists, is to audit agencies like DOD. How do we fix it? What's the legislation? What's the appropriations changes? What are the programmatic changes that we could make to really get at the heart of some of these issues?
Absolutely. And I did want to comment that if we had a high-risk list before 1990, DOD acquisitions would have been on it.
Yeah.
So that was the
Absolutely.
first year. So I think that, in the last conversation that we were just having about being able to kind of predict the future when you have this evolving technology and capabilities and, frankly, evolving threats is a really difficult thing to do. And so why are we trying to do that, right? Why are we not focused on how can we develop a capability that meets our current needs that can then be iterated on, and new technologies and new capabilities can be introduced as we go forward that can then respond to changing threats or changing user needs. So, if you kind of just take the difference between fighting in the Middle East and fighting in the Taiwan Strait, it's completely different needs, right? And, we might not have anticipated the distinction 10 years in advance, 15 years in advance to begin working on these technologies. But when you design acquisitions to be more iterative, to be able to be upgraded and modernized, and for technologies to be inserted in them, you don't have to predict the future. You've designed it such that you can be agile and adaptive to that process. And that requires a significant change within the department, because what we want to do is we want to lock in the F-35s of the world that we're going to use for the next 50 years and design these systems that we think we know are going to meet the needs well into the future, which is impossible to predict. So instead of doing that, we should be focusing on how we can design systems that are simple, that can be that have the space, weight, power margin to be able to have capability added. And this really requires a wholesale shift to a digital environment, being able to have these things designed digitally such that you can understand what certain changes to systems would mean to the design of the existing systems is a key element of it, so that you don't insert unnecessary risk into a program by trying to add a capability. So I just think that there's like a wholesale approach that needs to happen, and it happens here and there, and you mentioned the replicator program. When you see programs try and do things quickly and rapidly to meet new threats or evolving threats, they're happening outside of the existing system. They realize that the current system doesn't work to do what they need it to do, so they're working outside of the existing system. We need to change the existing system to make that the standard operating procedure for these programs.
And so it sounds like, based on what you're saying, the change and sort of paradigm has to happen on both the design and planning side as well as the appropriation side.
Correct.
Because if we put in a bill, we're buying this weapon system, we might be buying a legacy system that does not allow for that kind of innovation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'll just say, I know you appreciate history and good country anecdotes, so I'll just share. I'm positive if there had been a high-risk list in the 1800s that DOD would have been on it, because, fun fact, the Lincoln County wars happened in my district, and the reason why Billy the Kid got in shootouts that led to his infamy was over government DOD contracts. So there you go. It goes all the way back.
Well, I'll yield to, I'm going to Google that. I'm just going to have to Google that. Not that I don't doubt you, but I want to read more about it. I'm going to yield to Representative Burleson, and then we'll go to the Democrats after that. Is that good with you, Chair Lady? You good with that? All right, Burleson, go, brother.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, taxpayers are sending, $891 billion to this discretionary funding this year. For the Department of War. The American people expect us to get a better return, I think, for what we're spending and what they're sending to Washington, D.C. The Pentagon has never passed a clean financial audit, and I think that's why we're having this meeting today. And its weapons acquisition systems have been on GAOs, as has been mentioned in this hearing, on the high-risk list since the 1990s. Cost overruns on major programs like the F-35, the Ford-class carriers have already cost taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars while delaying critical capability that we need for our warfighters. The Trump administration is already moving aggressively to cut wasteful contracts, reform the acquisition process, and demand accountability. I wish more had been done within the Department of War with the DOGE effort. I wish they had just fully opened the kimono and let all the brilliant individuals that were providing their services to come in, but I don't feel that that was the case. Today, we want to hear, we have you amazing witnesses, and I appreciate you coming, and so I'm gonna start with Mrs. Oakley. What are the most promising reforms that you have seen that are already being implemented by the Trump administration? Let's start with the positives.
Yeah, I would say that the acquisition transformation strategy that was put out by the Department of War contains a lot of really promising approaches, including iterative development, a focus on modular open systems approaches, a focus on using commercial technologies when they're available. There's a whole cutting reviews, cutting bureaucracy through the process. And so there's a whole slew of things in that pretty thick acquisition transformation strategy, I think, that really begin to put us on the path. Oh, I'm sorry, one of the most significant, I can't believe I forgot it, is portfolio management. When you're talking about achieving a capability, managing systems in a portfolio becomes incredibly important, right? Because then you can make decisions about what is it that we're trying to provide and how can we use the things that we have within this portfolio to be able to achieve those capabilities. And it allows you to be able to invest more in one, less in another, as you're seeing demonstrated progress of achievement. And so I think moving to managing more by portfolio and less by platform will get us away from that kind of too big to fail mentality of like everybody's hopes and dreams are vested in this one, platform versus what are we really focused on? We're focused on what capability we need to provide the warfighter to be successful, and how can we use all of our platforms, all of our capabilities to achieve that. And so I really have a lot of hope for the changes that the department is putting in place in that regard. It's gonna also take budget flexibility to be able to truly leverage that portfolio approach, being able to shift funding and resources. And so obviously that's an area that the department needs to work with the Congress on to understand how they can have that type of flexibility. So I think there's a lot of positive things on paper right now. And we're gonna continue to look at execution over the next coming years to see how these things are actually panning out in practice.
You had mentioned the iterative process versus the big bang, I believe, in your testimony. Can you elaborate on that? Like the difference between, and I'm guessing this is mostly have to do with software development, or are you talking about physical acquisitions?
No. So our leading practices body of work. So essentially we do work where we go out and we talk to the top companies in the world about how they develop their products. And we're really focused on cyber physical products, they're called. These are products that are hardware products, but that are enabled by software capabilities. And that's the majority of what DoD is seeking to acquire now. And so really what the focus is on, instead of trying to define every single requirement to the nth degree at the beginning of the program, and then chasing after those programs for decades,
until you get to perfection.
Yeah, to perfection.
And then it's implemented. Okay.
Exactly. So the iterative development approach allows you to go through designs, iterative cycles of design, validation, test, user feedback to understand what is even the art of the possible.
Yeah.
How can we get to that capability that provides the minimum viable capability that the warfighter needs at that point? And how do we then design that system to be able to then continue to be iterated on so we can keep giving them what they need?
Do you see that that's kind of where American manufacturing is heading?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think Divergent was one company that I've toured, and it's a mind-blowing what they're able to do. Where
Absolutely.
You literally, it's almost like hitting print on your computer, and you've just developed an entirely new product.
Yeah, and they take a digital first approach, right? So they do everything digitally first. They understand every nuance of that system, what design changes are going to be needed, such that there's no surprises in the end, like we were talking about in the production phase. When you get to these surprise design changes where you've already started bending metal, you avoid that because you've already sussed out all the issues through the digital process.
And then if you get it into the field and they say, this isn't working, we need to make this change, you can quickly make that change.
Exactly.
I see. Okay, I'm tracking with you now. Do you think, and Ms. Malone, do you think that 2028 is that really going to be the first year that we're going to pass an audit? And do you think we're on timeline to do that?
I am actually going to have to defer to my financial counterpart in the DOWOIG. So we can get you an answer.
Okay.
I'm not the financial person, I'm sorry.
Ms. Oakley?
Yeah, I can't answer it definitively, but I did talk to our financial people before I came, and they mentioned that DoD is taking some steps to be able to get to an opinion on its audit, but they're very onerous steps, and they involve more fixing things at the end versus fixing the underlying systems that cause the problem. So reconciling versus putting in place and fixing the systems that produce the data that's necessary to pass the audit. And so we have a lot of questions at GAO as to whether or not it's going to be sustainable, because it is more of a cleanup versus a get it right from the very beginning type thing to try and get to that clean audit.
It seems that that's an area where AI could be extremely helpful to go in. Mr. Kennedy, your organization has documented that there's decades of wasteful spending from and tell me if this is true, $1,300 coffee cups to $150,000 soap dispensers. I mean, we all have heard about the hammers, right? And the toilet seats. But is this true? And can you explain how in the world does this possibly happen?
I can't speak exactly to those particular items. You know, it sounds like something that's within the realm of possibility. And I think, you know, it's tough. It's a big department with a big budget, operates around the world. There's a lot of areas where in my opinion, there isn't the amount of oversight that exists in other agencies. But you know, I think a lot can get lost in a budget as big as the department's. So, you know, I think I can speak more to exactly how particular weapon systems have gone wrong. I don't think there's anyone out there that is intending to spend that amount of money on particular, you know, coffee cups, et cetera. But this is just something that happens in a bureaucracy as large as
If you're a member who wants to find out if there's money being pushed into like a SAP cap or a STO, and then you're seeing $1,500 coffee cups, where would one look to determine? And this is a question, if anybody wants to volunteer, what advice would you have for us members of Congress of how we would go about discovering that? Ms. Gledhill.
Thank you, Mr. Burleson. This is a really important issue. We have so many examples of price gouging over the course of many decades with the Pentagon. You mentioned the coffee cups and the hammers. We've seen just in the past few years the Air Force paying nearly $1 million over the fair and reasonable prices for 12 C-17 spare parts. You mentioned a soap dispenser, that was included there. In 2024, Raytheon paid nearly $1 billion to resolve government investigations exposing the company for overcharging and defrauding the government on several contracts between 2009 and 2020, including one to purchase Patriot missiles. Now, the bottom line here is we need to know whether these contracts were subject to certified cost and pricing data requirements. What is certified cost and pricing data, you may ask? This is cost information that contractors are legally required to certify to the Pentagon as accurate, complete, and current. A nice analogy.
So that's the question we should be asking. Was this purchased under a certified, what is it again?
Is it a contract subject to certified cost and pricing data requirements?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And if they say no, then one could speculate that contract, that there's maybe more to that contract than what meets the eye.
Absolutely. I would say this is the biggest problem with exposing waste in military contracting, specifically as it regards to price gouging. Again, how is it that we're buying these contracts? We have seen legal requirements for certified cost and pricing information drastically gutted since the 90s, back when the Clinton administration passed the FASA and FARA Acts. This was streamlining acquisition regulation and the acquisition process. And so there are a number of ways that contractors are exempted from certified cost and pricing information. One of them is the commercial item definition. We've seen that definition broadened drastically, which I mentioned in my open testimony. You have specialized military parts that are considered commercial but are not sold in substantial quantities in the public marketplace. So I think that the main question members should ask is, why is the commercial item definition so broad? And specifically, why is it different from the definition of commercial off-the-shelf items? I am all for the Pentagon acquiring commercial off-the-shelf items wherever possible. These are commercial products in the realistic term, sense of the word, that don't require modification. But that is not the same in terms of statutory definition.
What I've found out to be is that a lot of these government programs won't do anything that's off the shelf.
Right,
They want everything customized,
right.
and that comes with a huge cost and
Right.
time delay, and everybody's nodding their heads. I look at the VA implementation of the Cerner system, and I experienced it from the side, on the private side, watching an organization have an insane level of demands on customization, and then complain about the costs. So, can I ask one more question, Mr. Chairman? I want to go back to Ms. Oakley. The line of conversation we were having about iterative development, how would those contracts work? So if they say, for example, contracted with Anduril or Divergent to produce a drone that does X, Y, Z, and then that contract just, how would that work? Because I think that where the paradigm shift is that today you put out the requirements, the RFP, and then they deliver on the product that meets all of the bells and whistles and everything that they've asked for.
Yeah.
How would this work, where you have an ongoing development?
Yeah, well, first let me say that this is a body of work, contracting for iterative development, that we have planned to get started because it's an area that we're getting significant questions. But it requires a complete refocus of how you're going about contracting, because you aren't putting on contract these detailed requirements and specifications, right? You're putting on contract, here's what we generally want you to achieve under this contract.
Keep it fairly open.
Keep it fairly open, and then the guardrails that you have aren't that you're dumping billions into that contract right out of the gates. You're dumping small amounts of funding into the contract as progress is demonstrated, such that you scale the funding as the knowledge builds and you understand what the art of the possible is. And so it requires a completely different approach. And then the other thing that I would say is, iterative development really opens the aperture for competition, because underpinning iterative development is that knowledge that I talked about in the digital infrastructure, but then also modular open systems architectures. So everybody's been talking about, MOSA's been around a really, really long time and nobody's ever done it. So it's like one of these things that major weapon systems have been required to implement a MOSA for, I think, 7 years now, and the number of programs that we have that actually do that is very minimal, because they have to do it to the extent practicable, right? And that's a big hole that you can drive through and say, it's not practical for me to do this. But if you've actually designed your system to be modular and the interfaces to be open, then you can open up the competition for
plug and play.
Plug and play, right, exactly. And it also, everybody brings up data rights in this conversation. It doesn't matter what's in the module. It doesn't matter what's in the black box. It just matters that the black box connects to the rest of the system, right? And so you don't need to buy Anduril's IP to be able to, contract with them for whatever capability you're trying to achieve in that iterative approach. You just need to make sure that they've designed their module or their subsystem or whatever it is to fit into the broader system. And then you can stay with them for the next iteration, or you can open it up for competition, and the specifications are right there as to what other companies need to do to design their interfaces to operate within your system.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Burleson. I'll represent Mr. Subramanian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming in today. I've just been in listening mode. Ms. Oakley, I think we had a hearing in this committee last year on iterative development. Is that correct? Right.
Yep, we had a good exchange.
You had this nice long report on iterative development. Do you feel like your recommendations have been heard and that people have started to implement them at the DoD?
You know what, I really do. I think, as I mentioned before with the acquisition transformation strategy, I think we're starting to see a lot of the right kinds of words being used and the right kinds of language. But again, it's where the rubber hits the road. Are we actually making acquisition decisions in line with those words? And that's what we do through our annual assessment of weapons programs, is track implementation of these leading practices. And we'll be issuing that report in another couple of weeks, so you'll see the progress there.
What does implementation look like to you?
Yeah, so implementation, kind of similar to the conversation that I was having is, are these acquisition programs structured iteratively? Do their acquisition strategies lead them down the path of chasing these very detailed, specific requirements for decades and decades where you're locked into cost schedule requirements, baselines from the very beginning? Or have you left the acquisition to the point where you can understand kind of the broad capability that you're trying to achieve, put in place a more segmented is the wrong word, a more narrow contract to be able to see what the art of the possible is, to say what capability can we provide the warfighter, and then you snap the chalk line on that minimum viable product and produce the product and get it out to the warfighter more quickly, all while you're taking their feedback and feeding it into what the next iteration of capability would be that you provided them. So it's more of a continuous looping process versus a long linear development process.
Great. That's great. And can we take a specific example, a hypothetical? Drone defense is in the news a lot now. And we had a hearing on drone defense last year too, where we all concluded it needs to be better. And I'm not sure what happened with that either, but I know we're working on it. But what would iterative development look like when it comes to drone defense, for instance?
Okay, so
I'm putting you on the spot.
you are putting me on the spot, but I can try. And if I don't quite get there, I'm sure my team back here can get you an answer after the hearing that's much better than I'll come up with. But essentially what we would do is, okay, so what are we trying to achieve? Drone defense is very broad, right? We have to think about what are the specific areas of need? What are the specific threats that we're trying to counter? What is the most pressing capability that we need at this point? And then you focus the design, validation, and testing and user feedback on that prioritized capability. And through that digital process, you're going to be able to determine what you can and can't do, what capabilities you can and cannot provide within the timeframes that are required. And so then you would say, let's say you're going through the process, you're designing, you're tweaking, you're getting the user feedback. They're saying, well, we said this, but maybe we need this a little bit more than what we said before. Can you tweak the design to do that? And going through those design iterations allows you to do that rapidly, such that then when you get to the end, you know you've designed a product that the user wants that's going to meet that prioritized capability that you're trying to meet. And then you go and use it, you field it, and then you get feedback from that fielding, and it loops back into that digital model, such that then you work on the next prioritized capability that you need to meet whatever changing threat is there.
Another concern I have generally is that I think we all thought the future of warfare would be expensive new technologies, and it'd be a technological race. And now it's actually the cheap stuff is really effective, right? You can build 1,000 drones, just swarm a base now, and it's hard to catch them all. And so I wonder, I don't even know if this is the subject of our hearing today, but I'm just thinking about this. Right now we're engaged in asymmetric warfare right now, and but future adversaries are seeing this, and they can say it doesn't cost much to really bother the U.S. in a conflict. And so
Right.
I guess how would our conversation today fit into that scheme? Because we can't just outspend the opponent anymore.
No, yeah, and that's why I think that kind of shift to thinking about capability portfolios versus program by program management, platform management is really super important. Because maybe we don't need the, $100 million platform to be able to achieve our intended goal. And that capability portfolio management allows that thinking about how do we counter the threat that we're trying to counter with what we have or with what's cheap and easy off of the shelf. How do we kind of make those decisions collectively and not get so focused on, we decided 10 years ago we were going to develop this platform, and by God, we're developing this platform, and we're going to get it out there regardless of whether or not it's useful anymore or whether or not it'll get shot down right out of the gates. And that's kind of that shift that I was talking about to capability portfolio management that I think is going to be essential to being able to deal in this kind of asymmetric environment.
And the last question for you, and then I'll pick on everyone else. You mentioned the definition of commercial item, and could you expand upon that? You were saying that it's become so broad, is that right? And that has led to issues. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Gledhill.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so before 1994, when we had the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act and the Acquisition Regulation Act, basically commercial items were not a thing, but contractors had to prove that what they were selling the military was actually sold in substantial quantities in the public marketplace, right? If there was no cost analysis, there had to be some kind of substantiation of their claim that this is in fact a commercial item subject to price competition because the public can buy it. Today, that is not the case. We can call something a commercial item that has never been sold to the public.
And so you would recommend, or this panel would recommend narrowing that definition to the pre-1994 definition?
I would. I won't speak for my
Okay.
panelists.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this definition? We're all in agreement. Okay, great. Sounds like a bill we can all work on. Does anyone have any thoughts on any other conversation, Ms. Malone or Mr. Kennedy, on either the future of warfare getting cheaper or iterative development? Or Ms. Gledhill too.
I do have a few thoughts. I think, it's obvious that the department has seen a need here, and the budget request reflects that, right? So there's a particular program called the Defense Autonomous Warfare Group. It had a budget in fiscal 2026 of $225 million. There's a request for that DOG, the acronym, in fiscal 2027 for $54 billion. So this is a program that does a lot of the R&D in the world of drones. And so that really demonstrates a profound understanding that something needs to change here. I think I have a real reticence to fully rubber stamp the department's ability to not get sucked into sort of overly expensive long-term programs that take forever and may not have utility sort of out of the block, as a co-panelists have said. The issue of gold plating, as it's known, the sort of development of a program into something that it kind of turns into a Frankenstein over time. It becomes more expensive. Maybe the capability expands, but its original utility is less as a result. We've seen this even in the replicator program, which I think we can all agree is kind of a success. This is designed to take the sort of very cheap $500 drones that are being used in Ukraine, produce them at mass. What we've seen so far is, while doing that, it's also, this program has bought the Switchblade drones, which have come up. These drones cost $170,000. So we're already well beyond the scope of a very cheap drone that can be kind of used and the bulk that comes with that. So I have very real concerns about, even if the department kind of gets the message that it needs to change here, structurally there needs to be change as well.
I would say that Ms. Oakley's been reading from my notes, so she covered a lot of what I would say. The one thing that I would also emphasize is that as the department is moving forward with the acquisition transformation strategy, which incorporates much of what she talked about, this has to be a long-term solution. It can't be, let's try this for a couple years and turn around. It's going to require leadership throughout the entire process, and it's going to require discipline and training. And so the acquisition officials know what all has changed. These are not simple changes to what the department is trying to do. There's decades of experience here that's you're trying to turn all of that decades of experience of a very structured process to something a little bit more flexible, a lot more flexible.
I guess my question then is, what incentive though is there to change right? And to, for instance, cut costs when the ask is $54 billion, let's say.
This is about holding the accountability piece for the department officials. And so we have to hold those officials accountable for cost decreases. That's the huge push in a lot of this acquisition transformation strategy is faster, less expensive acquisitions. And so if that is the goal, now it's upon us, and it is too early to tell, like a lot of these changes are just now being implemented, are the changes truly seeing the results we expect? And unfortunately, like it does take a little bit of time to let the department implement and then let us come in as oversight experts to see, are we seeing what we expect to see?
Ms. Gladhill, do you want to close this out? I saw you looking over.
I would love to, thank you. If I may make a narrow point about contracting instrument here, you're talking about drones, we're talking about what capabilities are required for the future of warfare, but as you say, there are different incentives for the government and for private contractors who may be tasked with delivering these types of capabilities. I mentioned in my opening statement that we are seeing an explosion in the use of other transaction authority, which is a contracting instrument, if you will, that expedites the process by exempting contractors from certain cost transparency and competition requirements. The argument for this, among many other rapid acquisition instruments, is that it allows new entrants to come in, right, and to hopefully drive down costs. I'd like to note that we don't actually have evidence to substantiate that claim. We don't know how effective other transactions are in actually increasing competition by introducing, non-traditional contractors into Pentagon work. Since we're on the subject of drones, we saw the DoD award OT agreements to Anduril, Boeing, General Atomics, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman to design and build the autonomous drone wingman called the Collaborative Combat Aircraft. And so I think that we need to be asking questions about how it is we're acquiring these capabilities, should they in fact be the future of warfare.
Thank you. I yield back.
All right, well, thank you. I think actually Mr. Subramanian's questions are a good lead-in to some of my follow-up questions that I wanted to ask, and if you have any additional questions, we're happy to do a second round. But one point I do want to make is that we were talking about drones and battlefield readiness. It's important, I think, to note that some of these legacy systems are actually deterrent systems, and you can't. There's sort of like two theories of how do we maintain national security. One is, the Cold War era deterrence systems, which include our nuclear capabilities, and these large legacy systems, which are integrated all over the world in our international relationships. And that is a sort of separate kettle of fish than what are we fighting on a battlefield with, because these are sort of two different kinds of systems. And so as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm thinking about, we really have to think about it in both ways. And there's problems with contracting in both of those worlds. We're in the process right now of doing a major modernization of our nuclear deterrence systems. And one of the reasons why we passed the CHIPS and Science Act, which we passed last Congress, is because the United States needs to upgrade all of the microchips that are in all of our weapons systems. And so all of these things are integrated. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But Ms. Malone, I also see you have others from your office behind you. As I was listening to you talk, so I used to work at OMB. I was in the Interior branch, so I was not in the defense world. But when you talk about, what it takes to sort of turn the ship, no pun, or maybe the pun is intended, within the culture change of how the agencies plan, I wonder if you think that Congress needs to direct Department of Defense to achieve a culture change like this? Would we need to pass legislation to say Department of Defense should engage these kind of contracting practices, should do a wholesale relook at, some way in which it's doing its planning? And/or is this something that comes from within the department or both?
That's an excellent question, and what I would initially think is that it has to first come within. And we look like, I've actually done a little bit of research on the acquisition transformation strategy. We as the OIG have 208 recommendations out there that have some of them, over a quarter of them are 4 years old. And so the acquisition transformation strategy either directly or indirectly touches over 70% of our open recommendations. That will be huge. So there is a look at how they plan to do this. Whether Congress gets involved, honestly, I believe the department has provided some legislation forward to kind of assist with some of this. And I would say working with the department to understand what they need in legislation versus what is internal is probably the easiest route to go.
Well, I'd love to follow up with you and look at the recommendations that you have had internally and GAO's recommendations, and it seems like that would be fertile ground for writing a bipartisan bill for modernizing the department. My last question is for you, Ms. Glenhill, and others, if you'd like to chime in. You know, the National Defense Authorization Act was marked up in the House committee this week. It included an unprecedented $1.2 billion price tag attached to it, in addition to the normal NDAA stuff that'll go to the floor next, and then obviously we'll have to negotiate with the Senate. Are there any common sense sort of low-hanging fruit that we should be thinking about of offering amendments that would significantly improve the way we address some of these issues? Do you have any recommendations for us? And happy to take recommendations from anyone.
Absolutely, I appreciate the question. I am going to reiterate what I've shared so far in this roundtable, which is that we need to strengthen requirements for certified cost and pricing information. I really can't emphasize enough how much we've gutted the FAR, and I'd like to restate that, in fact, these regulations exist to ensure that we're getting the best prices on military contracts. Regardless of what it is we're buying, we should be getting the best price on behalf of taxpayers. I don't believe that we are doing that thus far, and the issue with this is that it's even an issue difficult to track its true scope, right? Because so much of overcharging, of price gouging that the military experiences from private industry has been legalized by the gutting of the FAR. So restate the definition of commercial products and services to its pre-1994 definition, you know, lower the mandatory disclosure threshold for this information. And again, a lot of these sort of rapid acquisition instruments that we're relying on, not only for IVAS, the augmented reality headset that has been mentioned, that was another transaction. But we're using these acquisition pathways that are exempt from these cost transparency standards to do very ambitious acquisition programs, including space-based interceptors in the Golden Dome program, but also for all sorts of other sort of large acquisition programs. And this is a major, major issue for the DoD to be able to track cost growth later on.
Ms. Malone, this might have been asked before, but I might have missed it. Do contractors get penalized for poor performance, or do they lose out on future contracts?
I would love to say yes, but that would not be an accurate statement. So what I can say is that the metrics that are incorporated into contracts can be tricky depending on the number of contractors available that are bidding on a contract. So if we're dealing with a sole source, the leverage that the department has to get meaningful metrics into a contract, especially for a very important capability. So I always think F-35 is a good example in the sense that we know that we need the sustainment of the F-35. This is a sole source contract, so getting the right metrics to hold the contractor accountable is extremely difficult for the government to do. However, the more competition we have, the easier it is for the department to put those metrics in place. And then the key is having the right people in the department overseeing that contract and holding the contractor accountable. And that means that we have to have our independent data, we have to be watching what the contractor is doing, and not just make this an other duty as assigned that's not getting the necessary attention it needs.
Do the senior Pentagon officials or the federal employees who write and manage the contract suffer any consequences?
I cannot speak to that.
Okay. Can any of y'all? Nope. Ma'am, go ahead.
So there's a lot of reasons why, contracts go wrong, right? Like the contracting officer doesn't just write the contract without the input from the program office to say, here's what we want, put it on contract, right? And so there's a lot of kind of inputs to those decisions that result in the outcomes that we have. But I mean, I think that you've raised two issues that I think are really critically important. Number one, does the department use the levers it has to hold the contractors accountable through the contracting process? And in a lot of our work, we've found they don't. They continue to make payments, progress payments, and withhold very little from these contractors to be able to have a carrot or a stick. I'm not sure which one. I shouldn't use these kinds of things to hold them
You
accountable.
reward them with the carrot, you hit them with the stick.
Okay, all right, yeah, reward, the carrot, to be able to get them to do, what they're supposed to do or penalize them for not. And so, I have an example in my statement about the Joint Strike Fighter program putting incentives on the contract for on-time delivery that still allowed up to 60 days late delivering. And then even when other incentives weren't achieved, they just shifted the money to other aspects of the program. So there's no holding accountable. It's example, example, example after that where that occurs. And so we're not using the mechanisms that we have to be able to do it. But number two, and to get back to Ms. Gledhill's point about the FAR being gutted, the reason why the FAR is in place, right, is to provide guardrails, and certain requirements were put in place because of certain risks. And when you have an acquisition workforce that has declined, and many of the very experienced people have left the acquisition workforce over the past year, giving them free rein to be able to kind of do these OTAs, for example, or do contracts without the guardrails of the FAR becomes a very big risk. So I think I can't overstate enough the importance of the acquisition workforce in executing acquisitions, regardless of whether or not it's an OTA or a traditional, contract, to making sure that we're getting the best deal for the government.
All right. Ms. Stansbury, do you have anything else, or are you ready? Me to close?
I think I'd just ask if there was any other outstanding recommendations that you all felt you wanted to share before we close things out.
I just have one because it's related to the OTAs, and agencies aren't required to report certain OTAs to federal spending databases, and so we have an open matter for congressional consideration about changing the law essentially to say that all of these types of agreements, other transactions, need to be reported to federal databases like USA Spending. That way, then, you can have the insight into how much is actually being spent on these types of OTAs and agreements, just like we do for contracts, as they increase in use. And I think it's a really important lever for oversight, because I don't want to necessarily kind of suggest that we should take away the flexibilities, but we just need to have the appropriate type of insight and data to be able to ensure they're being used the right way.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today, and my colleagues, or my colleague, I guess, on the other side of the aisle, for her engagement in this critical issue. The testimony we heard makes clear that problems plaguing our defense acquisition systems are real and are longstanding, and they will not fix themselves. Both our taxpayers and our warfighters deserve better. $1 trillion a year is not a small sum, and we owe it to the American people to ensure that every dollar spent translates to the valuable and relevant technology our military needs. The possible solutions discussed today are a start, but they are only a start. The gravy train for these defense contractors has reached the end of the line, and it's time to bring about on-time and on-budget contracts going forward. The legislation I'll be introducing to limit stock buyback executive compensation for publicly traded companies contracting with the Pentagon will be the first step toward a United States military our taxpayers deserve. We'll be watching the numbers, we'll be watching the timelines, and if the status quo persists, we will act. Thank you all so much. Chair Lady, thank you, ma'am.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you for your recommendations. And, I think we can all agree that the system is broken and the American people are looking to us to figure out what can be done to fix it. And so, just in the last fiscal year, the government spent nearly $1 trillion in military and defense spending, and the American people deserve to know where that money is going. I think that what we heard today were a lot of good bipartisan, good government recommendations for how to address many of the long-standing structural issues at Department of Defense, and we look forward to working with all of you to implement them. But I do have to say, we could not have a hearing on waste, fraud, and abuse in DOD spending and not mention the current administration. And so I do want to take a moment to talk about the deeply troubling and at times illegal activities that we have seen coming from the White House and from the Secretary's office at the Department of Defense, not only in contracts, in deals that have been made with family members, insider trading allegations, and the misuse of the military in multiple foreign conflicts, including a war in Iran that we voted just last week to end because the Congress did not authorize this war pursuant to our constitutional war powers. All of these reveal a deeply disturbing trend of waste, fraud, and abuse within this administration, including contracts given directly to the president's sons, as well as contracts given to Elon Musk while he was engaged directly in his Doge activities, and the handing over of our private and secure data, not only as Americans, but also our national security data to private contractors. And so I want to also note that in addition to these good government bipartisan solutions, we will be investigating and we will hold them accountable. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you, ma'am. This meeting is adjourned.